Have you ever been on a team that you felt like had so much potential on paper, but for some reason they just did not perform up to their potential? It kind of reminds me of the 2003, 2004 Los Angeles Lakers, who had Gary Payton, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, and Karl Malone, four individual superstars who, on paper, they looked like they should have easily won the championship, but they lost to the Detroit Pistons. Now, we know if you go back and look at history, there are a lot of issues going on with that team. Kobe Bryant had some off-the-court issues he was dealing with, and there were a lot of chemistry issues that they were wrestling with. But on paper, it still looked like they should have been able to easily handle the Pistons, but for some reason, they did not perform at their highest level. And I think a lot of leaders experience that, where on paper, it feels like, man, we have all the right pieces, all the right players, but we're still unable to close what I like to call the performance gap. Maybe your team is full of superstars that are underachieving, or maybe your team doesn't have a lot of superstars. There aren't a lot of A players on your team, but you're still trying to figure out, how do I inspire them, equip them, encourage them, train them so that they can perform at a higher level than they're currently performing? Well, we're going to dive into that today. Well, my name is Seth Yolorda, and I work with organizations and individuals, helping them develop extraordinary leaders so they can accomplish extraordinary results. So for today's episode, I'm going to walk you through a document that I've been working on. Now, I want to be very clear who this episode is for. This is for leaders who have people on their team who are not performing at their highest level. Maybe they are stuck below where the role requires them to be, and you've tried everything. You have tried maybe coaching them, putting them on performance improvement plans. You've tried just having one-on-one conversations with them, letting them know, and you just feel like you're not sure what else to do. You have tried all of the obvious fixes. Nothing has moved the needle, and you are starting to wonder whether the problem is them or whether the problem is you. And I know a lot of leaders are there. You're like, maybe I'm just a bad leader. Maybe I just don't have what it takes. Or maybe it's just a bad team member and I need to help them find a different role or help move them out of the organization. And you're not quite sure what to do, but you recognize that you lead in a high stakes field, and it might be healthcare, it might be education, it might be mission driven work where underperformance carries real consequences. And you may even be in a situation where your boss is telling you, hey, you need to fix the performance on your team. Otherwise, there's going to be some consequences for you. And so you really feel like your back is against the wall. I want to let you know that you're in the right place. Now, let me just be very clear. This is not for you if you've already decided to manage a person out of the organization, right? This is about diagnosing before you decide. So you haven't decided yet. You haven't already given them like their last warning. This is, you are still diagnosing. And this isn't for you if you're looking for hiring or organizational policy tactics. This is about the people already on your team. You have someone on your team and you're not ready to cut them loose yet. You want to figure out, how do I help them improve? Now, I want to show you something that I've come up with that I think really helps clarify where a lot of leaders are. The situation is, you have a direct report who is stuck. Their work sits at a 2, but you need them at a 10. Now, I like to use sports analogies because I think it just so accurately reflects what we experience in everyday real organizational life. So just imagine that your team is down by 15 or 20 points and there's only 10 minutes left in the game. And you're like, listen, we need to close this gap quickly. Currently, you all are operating at a 2, but I need you operating at a 10. And when you're observing their behavior, they're not going after loose balls. They're not getting in their defensive stance. They're not hustling back on defense. They're not chasing their defender around, but they're just kind of going through the motions on autopilot. And you recognize that their current performance at a 2 is not going to actually help them win the game. You need them at a 10. Now, what this looks like on your team is maybe people are missing their targets and they're letting deadlines slip, or complaints are climbing and satisfaction scores are dropping. Maybe customers are calling in and there's a lot of returns, or there's a lot of cancellations. The turnover rate on your team is possibly rising. And maybe there's like skip level emails that are going 2 or 3 levels above you, the leader. And I've seen this where there are frontline leaders who are just complaining directly to the CEO. And now the CEO is looking at you like, yo, what are you doing? And you've tried to help. You've tried to move everyone forward, but for some reason, you just cannot figure out what lever you need to pull. Now, I want to be very clear that performance is about levers. When you are leading a team, it's about knowing which lever you need to pull in order to get the energy and the engagement from your team to increase. Now, I want you to recognize there are team levers and there are individual levers. For a team, you might say, I need to pull this lever and we need to address our time off approval process or our compensation process. That might be a team lever that you pull. For an individual lever, it might be how you talk to that individual, how you have one-on-ones with that individual, creating opportunities for that one individual to grow or to have stretch assignments. So you're looking at what's happening, their performance is dropping, and you're saying, okay, what lever, either team lever or individual lever, do I need to pull? Now, one mistake that I see leaders make is they make the verdict too quickly. In your head, you have already decided one thing. They either have it or they don't. And I just want to caution you from coming to a verdict around the performance of an individual on your team before you actually really investigated the different levers that you as a leader should be pulling. Now, this verdict, it normally has three traits. The first is it's fast. You might fall under the belief that first impressions are the most important. And I understand where we get that from, but just because someone might make a bad first impression doesn't mean that that's who they truly are. We have all made mistakes early on, whether it's in our career or in a new job or a new role. So I don't want you to fall into that category where you just make a very fast knee-jerk reaction, knee-jerk decision about someone's performance. The other trait is that this verdict, a lot of times it's quiet. You barely notice that you made it, but you have just kind of filed them away into another category in your mind around who they are as a performer or a non-performer on your team. And the last kind of trait that this verdict has is it's personal. It's a story about their character. You say to yourself that they don't care, or they're not committed, or they're not fit. And I just want you to be mindful of these, because sometimes we can, in fact, misjudge a book just because we don't like its cover. But in reality, that book might just be the very thing that's going to move our organization forward. Now, the reason why this verdict is a trap is because this verdict is not a diagnosis. It is a guess in a conclusion's clothing. You are guessing based off of maybe a few touch points with the individual that this is who they are, and you are labeling it as a diagnosis when it's really not a true diagnosis. The other reason is because once you reach it, you stop looking at the real cause. It's very easy for us to point the fingers at something is wrong with the person, not really wondering if something is wrong with us, the leader, or us, the organization. And then the person gets on a performance improvement plan, and the real issue, the real gap is never really named and is never really addressed. Now, the reason why we do this as humans is so interesting because we as humans tend to blame the person before the situation. And psychologists call this the fundamental attribution error. And I really want you to understand what this is. This simply means that we judge ourselves by our circumstances, but we judge other people by their character. And so when I miss a deadline, well, I will just say the week was brutal. But when they miss a deadline, we say that they are unreliable. So your report falls short and your mind reaches for a trait. They're lazy, they're not committed, they're not a fit. And it steps right past the situations that you can control. And so it's very easy for us to go for a trait and to use a trait as the explanation for why there is a performance gap, not really realizing that the situation might be the cause for the performance gap. And this trait bias is something that we can fix, but we can't fix it unless we're aware of it. So I want you to think about an individual on your team that you have already assigned a trait flaw to because of their lack of performance, when in reality, it may be more of a situational flaw than a trait flaw. Now, the override is when you can catch yourself assigning a trait. I want you to stop and ask what in the situation could explain what is happening, and then give the person the same benefit of the doubt that you would give yourself. So what we want to do is we want to reframe this. This is diagnosis, not a verdict. Underperformance is not one fuzzy verdict. It is a diagnosis. And a diagnosis has named causes. And there are, what I believe, 4 primary causes that result in underperformance. Not 20, but 4. And so the question moves from how do I get more out of them to what is actually in the way? Because I want to assume that every person has the capacity to perform at their highest level. And the only reason why they're not performing at their highest level is because something is in the way that I can address. Now, let me just say, there might be some people on your team who are underperformers, but that is a conclusion that we only want to come to after we have walked through every single one of the levers. So when we look at the performance gap, when you want a 2, but you're getting a 10, it generally comes down to 4 areas. There is a clarity gap, a capability gap, a confidence gap, or a community gap. These are the 4 gaps that as a leader, it is your responsibility to address. Now, I'm not going to have time to go into detail with every single one of these today, but we're going to walk through these over the weeks to come. Clarity is, do they actually know what is expected? The target was set once in a meeting, and we assumed it was clear. They are not failing because they are slow. They're aiming at a target they cannot see. So we want to make sure, do they know what is actually expected? Now, I know you, the leader, are saying to yourself, well, obviously they know what's expected. I've told them what's expected. I've articulated it multiple times. They do know. But just because you said it doesn't mean they heard it. We'll get into this. The second gap is the capability gap. Do they have the cash necessary to accomplish the task? Now, cash is an acronym, and it stands for knowledge, attitude, skills, and habits. That's knowledge, attitude, skills, habits. Do they have the cash? What do they need to know? What attitude do they need to have? What skills must they develop? What habits must they form? So when you're looking at someone, you're saying, okay, not only do they have to have the clarity, but they also have to have the capability. I can have, just using a golf analogy, I can have the clarity. Yes, I know I want to hit this ball 300 yards and then another 200 yards and then a one putt into the hole so that I can get a birdie. That would be beautiful in golf. So I have clarity on what I need to do, but do I know how to do it? Do I have the attitude, the mindset required to do it? Do I have the skills to actually hit the ball well? And have I developed the habits that are going to be required for me to do it consistently? So I want you to think about your team, and I want you to say, okay, do I have an underperformer? Number one, is it a clarity issue? Number two, is it a capability issue? Number three is it a confidence issue? Do they believe they can do it? They may be clear and they may be capable. Are they still playing small? Confidence is a track record, not a personality. People act their way into belief. Every team has self-defeating thoughts. What are the self-defeating thoughts on your team? I can have people on my team that says, man, I know how to do it. I have the right mindset. I have the skill set. I have the habits. I know what's expected of me. There's just confidence thing. And honestly, this confidence piece, it does overlap with this attitude piece and capability. I just want you to know that confidence is something that as a leader, you directly influence. And so I want to know, what are the beliefs of my team members? Do we actually believe we can hit the goal? If I don't believe we can hit the goal, it will be very hard for them to actually hit the goal. And the last step is community. Do they feel part of the team that has their back? A person can be clear and they can be confident and they can be capable, but they can still check out or leave because they feel alone. And so connection is the condition for performance, not a reward for performance. So we want to make sure that people feel connected and they are part of a community. Now, you have a role in these gaps. This is not about blame. The leaders I work with, they try hard, they coach, they train, they bring in mentors, but effort aimed at the wrong gap does not close it. It just looks like a person who will not improve. Having a role doesn't mean it's your fault. It means you have a lever to pull. So as a leader, you pull the clarity lever, the capability lever, the confidence lever, and the community lever. It is your job to know which lever do I need to pull in order to increase the performance on my team. The goal here is for you to diagnose. Before you decide a person cannot get there, run the 4 gaps. Go through each one, and we're going to walk through these in detail in the weeks to come. Most leaders skip the diagnosis. They jump to the verdict. Then they put them on a performance improvement plan. Then they move them out of their team, out of the organization. Now, I understand some people just have a lid, and that lid is real. Some people cannot reach the level the role needs, but a lid is a conclusion, not a starting point. You only label someone with a lid after you have gone through an honest assessment and an honest attempt to close the 4 gaps. So what I want you to do this week is I want you to pick one struggling direct report, and I want you to hold them in your mind and then catch yourself the moment you reach for the verdict and ask yourself the better question: which of the 4 is this person missing? So really think about it. Think about it. Is it a clarity issue? Is it a capability issue? Is it a confidence issue? Is it a connection community issue? You may not have a performance problem. You may have a gap, and that gap can be diagnosed and it can be addressed. So what I want you to do is I really want you to think about this as a leader, as you're working with your team and trying to move them from a 2 to a 10. The teams that are performing at the highest level, they have extreme clarity. They are increasing their cash, K-A-S-H. They're increasing their cash. They have a strong belief system. Their confidence is high, and they have community. Listen, we're going to dive into this. We're going to unpack it. This is the cornerstone of a lot of the work that I do with organizations. So if you're listening to this and you're saying, you know what, man, I really need some help walking this through my team. Can you come in? Please reach out to me. You don't have to close these gaps alone. Reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. You can reach out on LinkedIn or on Instagram or even here on YouTube or through the podcast platforms that you're listening on. And let's have a conversation around how we can assist you in closing that performance gap. I would love for you to also share this with your fellow colleagues who are also leaders. Let them know, hey, maybe it's not just the person, maybe it's the situation, maybe it's the context, and we can do some things to address that. Thanks so much for journeying with us today. We'll see you next time. Peace.